Hey, what is up you guys? This is Meyer, and in this video what I'm going to be doing is designing a pad sound in Spire for use in Uplifting Trance. This is what the pad sound we're going to be creating sounds like. And just by itself. So to get started, what I'm going to do, I'm going to open up Spire, and I've initialized the patch for this pad sound. And the first thing we got to do is we actually have to, I'm going to need to make the MIDI for this. And this is going to be really simple. What I'm going to do is just take the root note, which in this case is and to make chords out of these, I'm going to stack them up a fifth, and then I'm going to stack them up a major third. Should place them up here, but not all of these are minor chords, so I need to adjust them. This is a minor chord. And of course, what we can do is take these notes that maybe not too close and bring them up so that they're inverted. And we can take this and duplicate this an octave lower. This may not be necessary. Let's hear it with the lead. Cool, so let's move on to the actual sound design. This is how it's voiced, but the voicing is very important and a very important part of the sound design because how low you go with these notes, how much they're spaced out, can really affect what kind of sound you can use and how much you want to detune it. Now, the basic pad is a super saw passed through maybe some sort of filter with an ADSR envelope, and this ADSR envelope is probably the most important thing, more important than the filter envelope, which we saw in the last couple videos has been very important. So I'm going to bump this up to 9 voices and make just it really wide and detuned. Let's just hear this by itself for a little bit. And I am going to bump the voices up to 8 because we're playing 4-note chords here. Now let's go ahead and add a little bit of attack and a lot of release, decent amount of release. Now the important thing when you're designing pad sounds for uplifting trance, you don't want too much attack. And this was the biggest mistake that I used to make when I was designing my pads. I'm like, why do my pads just not fit in the mix? They don't seem to fill it out. I was kind of debating not using them in a lot of tracks because they just didn't really help. But what the issue I was having was that I was having the attack be too high and the pads just wouldn't come in, and it just kind of didn't fill the sound out. Whereas when you have a little bit of attack, You don't want to mess with the transients of your leads or anything, but it's short enough that they actually come in and help bolster the sound before the chords change or before, you know, the bar's over. Then you actually get with that good sound that you're looking for. That's what I was doing before, whereas maybe a more reasonable attack would be somewhere around here. Cool, so I'm going to go ahead and copy this oscillator to oscillator 2, and I'm going to pitch it up an octave. I actually don't really like the way that sounds, so maybe I'll pitch it down an octave. And I'm going to take this analog button off both of these just to help. It helps with the phasing that we're hearing. Cool, now with oscillator 3, I'm going to just set it to be noise. We're going to widen it up and turn the key tracking off, and just to kind of bolster the sound up a little bit. Sounding good. Now, generally I don't put reverb or delay on my pads. You can maybe add a little bit of delay, but I find that can muddy up the sound. Sometimes I'll put reverb on, but I don't think that's super necessary. Chorus you can maybe add, which is kind of an interesting thing to do to bolster up the sound. It kind of can get a little bit lost doing it that way, but it can also help to push it back in the mix, which maybe is what you want. There's this Jupiter 8 model, which I kind of like using. I think that is helping to kind of fatten up the sound a little bit. The other thing I find that can be interesting is I'm going to use a 2 dB per octave slope because it's a little bit more gentle. So this is the Infecto model based off the Virus. And I am going to map it to the mod wheel so we can open it up using the mod wheel. Now you hear what's going on here. The cutoff is mapped to filter 1, so I'm just going to turn that off. Now I find with these pads, you can either run it through another filter, another low pass filter to keep it from getting too bright, or you can use the soft button, which pretty much does the same thing. I may run it through this other filter just so we can control where it's going. Sounding good, and we can add a phaser, which can help give it a little bit of movement. There are a couple ways we can add movement to the sound. One would be using an LFO to modulate the pitch, so I can say envelope 1 is going to be all oscillator pitch and give it a little bit of an amount. Now, if you do that, I like clicking and dragging and adding a little bit of fade in, just so that way you don't get those pitch modulations right at the start. Very subtle, but very nice. And we can add this phaser as well. Some people will do 100% wet and no rate. Which I think is an interesting thing to do. Whether or not you have this, I'm kind of not sure. It doesn't change the sound a lot. It sounds warmer to me with it off, so I'm going to leave it off. And last but not least, whether we use this multiband compressor, I don't know if I always use it that often with pads. I just find it can just brighten the sound a little bit too much. In this case, I think I'll use it. It sounds pretty good. So let's hear that with the lead. So this D I'm not too sure about. I think I may lower this down a little bit because the melody actually jumps from the C down to the F. And something we need, of course, is LFO tool on this. I'm not sure if we need these low notes. I'm kind of debating. The pad already has a lot of low mid energy, which is pretty much primarily what we're using it for. And then when the lead comes in, that's filling up the top end, whereas the pad's just kind of filling out the whole spectrum, but also filling the hole that's kind of in the low 400 to maybe 800 range and bolstering that. Now, in my tracks, I don't tend to make the pads super forefront in the mix. I'm using them pretty much as a pad, as kind of pushing them back, but filling up the frequency spectrum so that when you mute it or when you turn it off, you notice that something's missing, but it's not necessarily acting as a lead. Whereas there are some producers that'll use pads as leads, or maybe they'll use a pad-like sound playing like monophonically, and that's like their lead. So really it's down to you, it's up to you for this track, because the ARP is so prevalent, or this, it's like a demo, I guess. For this demo, the ARP is so prevalent that I'm using the pads more in the background. But in this case, I think it works pretty well, the sound that we've created. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to save this. Background, it's a background pad, and I'm going to save it in my folder for my Spire bank, which you can buy. I'll have a link when it's done. It's not probably going to be done when this video comes out, but it will be done soon. So definitely check that out. You can buy that and get a lot more pad sounds that are that I've made that are similar. And hope you guys found this video helpful. Let's go ahead and play it one more time so you can get it, kind of hear it again, and in the whole section here. And then sometimes you can add it in the intro. I'm not going to change it here, but you can. And I'll see you guys in the next video, where I think we'll be doing an acid line.